Oh, you are?
I locked that door. How did you get in here?
I can move through doors.
You cannot move through locked doors. I take this stuff really seriously, man. I'm gonna have to start all over.
Okay, well, sorry. Didn't know it was such a big deal.
How many different snacks did you bring in here?
Well, I brought a few in here.
You better not be making crumbs on my carpet. This is my room. Don't bring your snacks in here and spilling your crumbs all over all my stuff.
Okay. I'm sorry I messed up your little ritual. Duly noted. I'll be out of your hair in just a few minutes.
Whoa. Wait a minute. Those are my roasted pistachios from Natural Grocers. Those are my salted roasted pistachios from Natural Grocers. That's my favorite snack, and you know it, and that's on my shelf of the pantry, which you're not supposed to be eating my stuff on the shelf of the pantry! Okay, I've put up with a lot of your crap in the past, but now you've asked for it. Now you've gone and offended a magician, pal. I summon every dark power of the underworld to banish this unworthy soul. Avada Kedavra! Serves you right, eating snacks from my shelf of the pantry. Roommates. You can't live with them. You can't afford rental housing costs in America without them.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of ZEIT HEIST, the video podcast program where the host chooses to sit on the floor next to outdated technology to record an intro. Kind of a weird aesthetic choice, and also, don't look at this right here, I don't know what that is. That's from, and I'll probably blur that out anyway in the final cut. Today, we're talking to Micki Pellerano, professional astrologer, artist, filmmaker, international playboy, overall handsome and sexy man. I mean, I'm straight, but yeah, I would, okay? And always good to talk about, coming on to your guests. That's great. We have a wonderful conversation. Micki is so talented, deeply and widely read and studied. He runs his own show called Time Lord TV, which you can find on YouTube, and I've provided a link in the show notes. It's marvelous. It has musical guests. It has interviews. It has an astrological overview of the coming month, and it's so well done and creative, and I didn't copy his idea by doing this show and none of that, so don't bring it up, and it's totally different, and there's no correlation there, and don't sue me. So kind of great. If you're watching this on YouTube, marvelous. You are getting the fullest expression of the show. If you're only listening on a podcast provider and it's audio only, you are missing out, my friend, on the full experience of what ZEIT HEIST is. So I would encourage you to go to YouTube and see the full show. I have a Patreon. If you would like to support what I do, you can do so by heading to the link that I've provided in the show notes. It's patreon.com/thejoshgaines. Without further ado, here we go. Episode 3. Let's talk to Micki. Well, welcome, Micki. I'm so excited to have you. I'm so pleased that you were willing to do this.
Thanks.
How do you, when somebody asks you what you do, how do you introduce yourself? What do you say? Because you do a lot of things.
At this point, I really just say I'm an astrologer because I assume that they mean that, what I do for a living. So
Sure.
I tend to say astrology, even though I make a lot of art, and my astrology practice, you might say, did grow out of my identity as an artist, maybe. But I consider myself by trade a professional astrologer.
Yeah. I like to ask at the beginning, sort of, what is something that has caught your interest recently? Just whether a book you read or something you've been interested in or something that has taken your own practice deeper. What has been fascinating you in this time of life right now?
Well, I tend to take courses quite often on astrology. So recently I took a class by Bernadette Brady, who's kind of an authority on the fixed stars and their influence in astrology, which is actually very complex and fascinating. And she's developed, or she uses a very sophisticated and complex system for doing that. And then I also study kind of in a prolonged manner under teacher Austin Kopic, and right now we're discussing different timing techniques of the Hellenistic astrologers, such as Firmicus Maternus and Vettius Valens. So, you know, always experimenting with new and old timing techniques and different elements of astrology and incorporating them into my practice.
Yeah. It's such a massive world of knowledge to dive into. And I imagine in some sense the work is never done when it comes to astrology. Does all of that learning sort of just deepen your own understanding and the sort of nuance with which you can speak to reading people's charts and understanding what is going on, or how does it influence your astrology work and the way you give readings?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Like, just examining different ways that astrology can be used really just informs a whole sub-layer, you might say, of understanding of it, really. And how, because it's a very elegant system, and you know, just as the cosmic movements are so have such patterns within them that are so refined and so perfect and so geometric, you know, kind of unfolding the layers of that geometry and of that symmetry and of that cohesive system always, I think, just deepens one's general understanding of it. Even if a particular technique ends up not being part of someone's toolbox as an astrologer, it will certainly inform a deeper resonance on how this mysterious cosmic complex really functions.
Yeah. I'm curious, what was the moment or the period of your life where, not, instead of asking like when did you get into astrology, when was the moment that it like bloomed wide open for you and something that made you feel, I want to dedicate more of my life to this and to helping others understand it? When was that?
Well, the big blow up moment, I would say, was relatively recent, because, you know, astrology was always around in my life. It was always in the background. You know, I mean, I come from a Cuban family, you know, and we had Walter Magickal, and everybody was very interested in astrology. And, you know, people would affectionately refer to each other if they had the same sun sign and stuff like that. And it was always very prominent. And in a way, I always thought that way. I always categorized all my friends at school, say, from the time I was in, you know, third grade, by their sun signs and stuff like that. And there were patterns that I would recognize since I was a kid. And then I got very into Hermetic Magick and chaos magic when I was about, I would say this was probably 2002 is when when I got really hardcore about it. And when you study the Golden Dawn systems, and, you know, Aleister Crowley and these classical systems, these hermetic ways of understanding the planets and the astrological signs and the way that they weave into the structure of Kabbalah really becomes an integrated part of the way that you think, and an integrated part of the way that you categorize everything. So I primarily used astrology for magic at that point in my life, and didn't really use it so much for, you know, natal astrology as I do now, because astrology seemed, I guess, unsophisticated to me or something compared to the Hermetic knowledge. Like, it seems, oh, you know, there's some lady in like a sweater and goofy glasses, like stroking her cat, talking about, you know, kind of psychology, right? Like talking about like kind of some kind of like watered down Jungian situation. And I was like, that's not my world, you know. Hermetic stuff is. So what happened was, about probably 20 years ago or so now, these astrologers such as Alan White, Demetri George, uh, Robert Hand, Robert Schmidt, they started this thing called Project Hindsight, which was a focused translation of many Hellenistic and Hermetic astrological texts from, Alexandria, and also some Renaissance stuff. And they really revealed the Hermetic content, a lot of the Hermetic content of astrology, and how it could be incorporated into natal astrology, how it was, and in a sense, these techniques had been lost for, in some cases, like 2,000 years almost,
Yeah.
1,600 years. So we're starting to see, and of course with the translation of the Picatrix, which there've been a few now, but this is a grimoire of astrological magic. So we're starting to see more of a crossover between Hermetic magic or Hermetic philosophy and natal astrology that really began then. And when I started picking up on that, and that was going on, I really I really was like, all right, now I'm full on. But I would say maybe about 7 years ago, because people always came to me for tarot readings for years. It's probably been, gosh, I don't know, maybe like 17 years now that people would call me and say, hey, can I come over? I'd like you to read my cards. It was something I always did as a side gig or a side thing. People always knew they could come. And it got to the point where people would say, okay, I'm here for a tarot reading. And I would say, okay, but we're going to do a little bit of astrology first, because in this way, I'll be more educated with the symbolism of the tarot and how it presents itself once I'm aware of your astrological configurations.
Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's beautiful how those coincide and inform each other, and how much the Thoth deck is interwoven with all that astrological stuff. How does astrology inform your magic practice, or just and you don't have to get personal about that, but just as far as being aware of timing, or when a certain ritual may be stronger, or a certain intent behind the ritual may be more helped along by the positions of the planets of that time? How does that integrate?
Well, if one is doing astrological magic, it's obviously essential, and this is part of the canon of the Hermetic magic anyway. I mean, they had Agrippa, the 3 books of occult philosophy, Henry Cornelius Agrippa. They understood the planetary seals, they understood the planetary hours, they understood that Venus rising in her sign of Libra, etc., to be used, like the positions and timing of the planets to be used. They understood the importance of that, and there are many complexities. You can't simply choose any day that Venus is rising in her sign, because that happens 3 months out of the year, kind of. A lot of other conditions need to be just so. There can't be interference from malefics. The moon has to be cooperative. Things like this. And, this can be incorporated into any ritual, I would say. It can be incorporated into, say you're just a chaos magician and you're throwing sigils out there, which there's nothing wrong with that. I've had a lot of success and a lot of development as a magician through these techniques, through not using astrology at all. But nowadays, because astrology has become so ingrained in near just the way that I think about everything, I probably wouldn't do an untimed ritual of any kind, I think, at this point.
Yeah. I'm curious, when it comes to, like, there's a lot of pop astrology out there, and there has been for many years. And it's like, I would never want to insult or be unkind to anyone who takes an interest in astrology. But when it comes to, maybe something more gimmicky, like allure.com posting someone's horoscope for the day, and it's fairly surfacey and just all about romance or wealth or these sort of kind of petty things, on the surface, like what is something in the larger scope of astrology that you wish the general public might pay more attention to, or what is something that gets overlooked because people get lost in sort of the surfaciness that never takes them any deeper?
Uh, I think what gets overlooked is that astrology is just hiding in plain sight almost everywhere. You know, I
Hmm.
mean, it's like if you take a walk around any major city, you know, New York City, Washington, D.C., anywhere in Italy that has a town square, you know, all over London, you're going to see astrological imagery everywhere. You're going to see zodiacs, right? You're going to see planetary images used in, say, architecture and uh, even mapping of metropolitan areas and stuff like that. For example, take Grand Central Station in New York City. Not only is there a mural of a zodiac painted on the interior ceiling of Grand Central, but there's also a sculpture of Mercury, you know, standing naked with a wand in front of this thing, and it's like, you know, who else would you want, right? What other planetary deity would you want kind of like presiding over a train station like that? You know, it's a deity who represents commerce, who represents speed and efficiency and data, and the absorption and conveying of ideas and you know, even products. So you see it all over the place, you know, and I think that the fact that astrology has, I don't know, it has this, it's almost bizarre that it has this compartmentalized identity kind of around it. Like, oh, that's something outre, or that's something so out there. I'm like, well, not really, because you're amidst it constantly, and you're just to the point where I'm like, people don't seem to see it or something, because it's like, I mean, you know, you go to Rockefeller Center, you got Prometheus with a ring of the zodiac around him with all the signs, you know, represented, and then you turn the corner and across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral, you got a sculpture of Atlas in Art Deco, again, the zodiac. So it's not only neoclassical architecture, it's also Art Deco. It's, you know, it's all over the place. And our relationship to the stars and our relationship to the planets, I think is so encoded in the symbolic mind of humanity in every culture, that it's really very installed, you know. And of course you go to Italy and forget about it. I mean, you're not, every single ceiling fresco is going to be about the triumph of some planetary deity, right? And it was built that way because whatever deity that is was the ruler of the ascendant of the you know, the noble who lived in that palazzo.
Right.
And they also used timing, astrological timing, to construct those buildings as well.
Yeah. Those hermetic symbols are everywhere, and that's kind of a gift, or it's been so fun and fascinating as someone who only came into all this stuff in my 30s to realize, like, these symbols are everywhere. We are immersed in them, and yeah, it's like, before this point in my life, I was just blind to all that stuff. I was like, yeah, that's a statue. Oh, okay, that's a symbol for Venus or whatever. Like, whatever, that's the same as anything, the Target logo or something. But then to come to realize, like, not only are those meaningful symbols, but even the timing in which you come across them is sometimes kind of a I don't know, maybe a synchronistic moment, or maybe just a reaffirming of what you are learning at that point in time, which is fun.
Definitely.
Yeah. When it comes to those, like, structuring buildings and the timing in those great places, like Italy, it makes me think of, so your altars that you often post pictures of, which are so beautiful and ornate and, like, finely crafted, you know, there's, I get a sense in what you in particular make of, like, there's a devotion and an adoration. This is not just something surfacey to, like, manifest some money, you know. Maybe that is a part of it sometimes, but there's like yeah, a sense of adoration for these energetic entities that you are putting a lot of intention and art and your own creativity into. So curious if you speak any to that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was an idea that I first was introduced through Aleister Crowley, you know, and just this idea of like, even when you're not doing a ritual, you want to flood your mind with the symbolism and correspondences of a particular, say, planet if you're working with it, right? So if it's Venus, it's going to be green, you know, the color green and and copper and you know, beautiful men and women and beautiful smells and flowers and, you know, fine jewels and or certain stones even, et cetera, et cetera. And you really want to immerse the mind in this kind of imagery and immerse the senses in general, you know, the visual senses, but of course the olfactory senses with incenses and things like that. And, you know, so you know, from one perspective, it's like, oh, these you're presenting offerings to a spirit that matches a particular tenor or vibration or something, right? If you know, if I'm gonna say be invoking Mars, it would be all like, you know, muscle and steel and red and blood and iron and stuff. So, but if you're doing Venus, it's going to be floral and fragrant and stuff like this. And if it's Jupiter, it'll be, you know, blue and the number 4, and there's all kinds of imagery that piles up to depending on how you look at it, either immerse the psyche into the zone of a particular energy, or to invoke living entities or energies of a given, say, deity or planet or what have you. And yeah, because I am an artist and I come from an art background, and you know, I suppose the way I was able to build a reputation as an occultist was because I made so much occult art throughout my life, and you know, and it was always presented as such and quite visible that way. So aesthetics are important to me, and I think they might be important to the spirits too. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
how much beauty and effort that you put into what you're doing. I mean, that's a form of energy. That's a form of reverence. You know, so I do think that that's you know, that's an asset to somebody's magical skill. If they have an artistic sensibility, say, it's a talent that maybe should be poured into a magical practice.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the most just, well, pure pleasure of these esoteric things, is being able to integrate creativity into it, and realizing that like the universe itself and my highest divine self is the creator, so to speak. And to integrate that as much as possible is not only fun, but like has a tangible effect on the outcome and on one's growth. um yeah, I feel that I'd be curious as to your thoughts on this, like that I believe magic as a whole is ultimately getting us to kind of confront ourselves, or that is one of the things that it ultimately does. And that astrology too, astrology, tarot, like I feel that part of the reason these things work and they're real and these patterns are identifiable, and that when we are confronted with that, that should take us deeper. You know, it should lead us to asking why. Like, why does this work? What is going on here? What is the larger mechanism that is behind these things? And I think that magic and tarot and astrology and meditation all swirl together, to ultimately get us to like awaken to our own divinity. At least that is my perspective at this point in time, and that is a practice that I am still on the journey of. But yeah, any thoughts on that, or any disagreement or change of difference of opinion?
No, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, they're all systems to basically you know, enhance our awareness of uh divinity, which I guess is a kind of a vague word, but I think a good way of putting it into words would be say that the exterior universe has an intelligence that mirrors the individual human intelligence, and the exterior universe has an order and a beauty, and cycles, and nature also has these cycles, and the way the world works and the way the universe works, to be in to align oneself with that, and to be to have the rhythm of one's heartbeat kind of move at that same pace and go with the be at one with the exterior macrocosm, you might say,
Yeah.
is probably maybe the highest aim of magic, and there's a playfulness about it too, like kind of as you said, like, oh, you'll be focused on something and then all of a sudden you'll recognize an emblem somewhere or a sculpture somewhere right as you had a relevant thought, and synchronicities like that are probably proof of you being somehow in that moment of sympathy with the macrocosm, right? If things like that are happening to you,
Yeah.
there are probably clues that, like, all right, you're at one, right, when this is happening. And there's also like a sense of play, I think, that there's a chaos magic. I don't know who said this. I don't know if it's Phil Hine or maybe Peter Carroll or something. Sounds more Phil Hine to me, but one of those chaos magic guys early on in my magical studies was like, the universe wants to play. Like it wants you to engage with it. It wants you to interact with it. It doesn't want to act upon you, right? It's not like, oh, okay, Jupiter's shooting a big laser beam at you right now, and that means that you gotta like laugh and drink and spend money. It's like, no, it's like that the universe wants you to tap in, like nature wants you to like ask her to unveil her secrets to you, and it likes it, and it wants to have a conversation, and it wants to have an interplay, I think, or I've experienced. And so there's many levels, and of course the whole like topics of self-empowerment, really, too, as you said, like realizing that we all have creative faculties, and that we all have gifts and abilities that should be optimized, and I think that culture obviously is set up in a way that sometimes hinders our sense of power and our sense of what we must do or what we ought to do or how much we can do. So there's kind of many fronts, I think, that it all works upon,
Yes, absolutely. I was thinking to when you read my natal chart a couple months back and had some very helpful insights for me to practically navigate what is going on in this sort of current period with Saturn slapping my ass for the next year or so. But in a larger sense, or when you perhaps look at your own chart or look at other people's charts, and you can recognize some periods of trouble or struggle, or some moments that are just going to be a little harder on them. What is like, how do you engage with that, and how do you encourage people to, like, I don't know what I'm trying to ask, like, how do people ride through those difficult moments when the planetary energies are just going to be weighing them down some, but how do they move through that well without getting bogged down and discouraged and like losing focus? I
Gosh,
suppose
there's
it depends on the.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, like first of all, one benefit of astrology is because it's so time based that you can be like, okay, well, this is gonna, you know, this is gonna ease up at around this time, right? So, you let them know that it's like not forever, but also even more valuable than that, to I think lean into what's happening, because there's always some benefit. I mean, we like,
Hmm.
some people don't like this idea, but I do believe that like within our lifetime, we are sort of evolving, and we are maturing and developing in certain ways. And that even the difficult transits or periods in our life are part of that, you know?
Hmm.
And so there's definitely ways to, uh, from a practical perspective, work with that in a more aware and engaged way. But then there's also ways, say magically, or yeah, implementing magic, implementing stones, implementing herbs, into implementing devotional practices, implementing remediation of the chart, right? Such as like donation practices, or
Hmm.
just awareness of how certain negative signatures in the chart that will be, triggered by certain uh, uh, transits through time, how to mitigate the ill effects of those, and then how
Hmm.
to optimize the the advantages. Because if you're going through one bad transit, you're probably within that, you're also going to be going through several positive ones as well. So there's ways to kind of like um, enhance, right, one's advantages, and mitigate one's disadvantages using astrology, either simply by practical procedures, or more esoteric or spiritual procedures as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that perspective, and the it's a helpful thought to remember that, yeah, these difficult transits are also part of the growth of that person, and sort of the larger story of their life and what they need to work through to grow and change and become whole. um, I'm curious, this is a bit on a different note, but I have heard implication that 2022 may be a difficult year in some ways. Are you open to speaking to that at all, or do you know what that refers to? I listen to the astrology podcast sometimes, to their monthly overviews, and they've hinted at it, but they've not said anything about 2022.
Well, I mean, there's going to be some really dope transits in 2022 for sure.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's like I mean, look, there's bad astrology every year.
Yeah.
There's bad weather all the time.
Mm.
And it's like it kind of depends what you're talking about. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, having Jupiter in Pisces for 6 months sounds pretty damn good, and then Venus in her sign of exaltation in Pisces sounds fantastic. Meanwhile, you've got Saturn in his rulership in Aquarius. You're going to have the sun in its sign of exaltation in and we're just talking about the first like 6 months of 2022 here. You'll have the sun exalted in Aries, and you'll have uh Mars exalted in Capricorn. It's like all that. I want to make talismans for all that stuff. I mean, I'm more looking at all the good, and I think it's going to be pretty rad. I mean, not to say that there's not going to be some difficult things. I mean, Saturn
Mm.
already started squaring Uranus all this time, and there's going to be, but I don't really see how it's going to be a particularly bad year. Especially
Mm.
those first 8 months look pretty damn good to me. And also it depends on your chart too. It's like, oh,
Sure.
okay, if you've got like Mars and Saturn in hard aspect to your moon or something, and I mean, that double trouble is going to last like 2 months. Venus does go through a retrograde in Capricorn, but I don't know. I mean, almost the whole time Mars is in Capricorn, Venus is like right along with it, like kind of bonifying Mars in a way, in a sign that he's already exalted in.
Mm.
So I don't know what specifically people are addressing that's bad, but there's a bunch of stuff that I'm pretty stoked about.
Nice. Yeah, that's helpful to hear. I can tend to sway into much of a cynical or negative or fear-based mindset, just because of my upbringing and sort of defaulting to that. So that is extremely helpful to just, yeah, look at the positive movements as well. And even as it pertains to my own chart, I think there is some cool stuff happening. You've moved through, or you embody a number of different interests and disciplines like astrology, and you've made film and video, and you are an artist, and you are a performer, you're a practicing magician. Was there a time in life in which did it take you a while to land upon sort of your path, or like what is the most Mickey thing that you could do? Were there some dead ends? Were there some, just, I don't know, some wandering and some feeling like you weren't quite doing the right thing? And I'm not speaking just a career, but I'm curious if it took you a while to find yourself, so to speak. Or did you always know in a certain sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can't ever really say like that I was really off the mark, at any given time. Like for example, the magic thing, a lot of people ask me, especially people who I'd say, grew up in like Christian atmospheres and stuff, are like, oh, like, did your family disapprove of your interest in the occult? And it was almost like, well, first of all, they don't. And second of all, like, there was never a discussion. There was never an opportunity. They couldn't have gotten in edgewise, even if they did disapprove, because it was just something I was like, it was a path I was on, and I did have like an artistic path. And, I mean, there are, of course, like, I look back and I do wish I did certain things with more confidence, and I wish I did things maybe with more feeling of self-worth and stuff like that. But I'm happy about all the different disciplines in which I've, in some cases, even dabbled, right? And never developed real mastery or proficiency in certain, say, art forms and stuff like that. I mean, I had fun, and everything was part of, even if there were blunders, like they're part of figuring that out, and I think that life has a way of making a lot of sense in retrospect, where you look back and you're like, oh shit, well, if I had never done that, and this would have never happened, but a lot of things, I mean, also being receptive to what happens. Like, for example, I don't know, I never wanted to play in a band, and one day I was playing in a band and touring all the time, and it was like something I never had interest in doing. And even being a professional astrologer is something that sort of happened to me, it's like, it just, I was doing my thing, which was reading people's cards all the time and studying magic all the time and practicing magic all the time and learning about astrology all the time, and just people kept coming, so it's almost like if you dive into what you really love to do, and you hang out with the people you really love to be with, and you nurture your interests and nurture your passions in such a way, I think that that's when things like come together.
Yeah.
I mean, even wild nights spent out drinking that might seem like a waste of time, you're like, well, wait, I formed these like strong bonds with these people, say, in this city, and now, what has that done? It has propelled all sorts of other things in one's life. It's impossible to tell what's going to be a deviation, quote unquote, from the path might be a tremendous asset. One never really knows.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think? What would you say your ultimate desire is with giving astrology readings and helping people along? What is like your life's work, or your what gets you excited and passionate? Like, or are there things that you want to do that have not come about yet?
Understanding more, I mean, it's understanding these mysteries more coherently and more vividly, and living a life that is more enlightened in these ways. I think that's the core goal, and of course, like, I love working with people. Like, I mean, so, like, that's the most rewarding part, is being able to share that, so, like, being able to share it with other people and help them through things. And in a lot of ways, it's a lot easier to do somebody else's astrology than to do your own, because you're looking at it from a rather forest for the trees kind of perspective a lot of times. So I mean, I'm kind of happy where I'm at, in a way. Like, I love what I'm doing, but of course the scope and scale I would always want to increase, and how good I am at everything, and how deep my understanding really is, and how how much more richly enmeshed I am with this kind of symbolism and this kind of wonder of nature and the cosmos and human interaction, and human compassion.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Has there been anything along the way that has, well, you come from such a different framework and background than I do, that I really admire, and it sounds like you don't have a lot of the sort of, or any of the religious, like, superstitious fear around these occult things. But I am curious if there's been anything that has frightened you or surprised you, or just that, like, confronted you in the sense that you had to reevaluate what you believed or how you were going about it, or I don't know, in that sense that, like, magic confronts you with yourself and doing shadow work or ancestral karma, or things that come up. Has there been anything like that you're open to speaking to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I kind of think that everybody has what might be called like a psychic sensor. I think all of us have something in our egoic mind that keeps us, it's the same part of you that doesn't want to meditate because you've got too much to do or something, right? It's like, there's a part of us that wants to keep us away from that mysterious and primal kind of regions of the psyche that magic taps into and mysticism taps into, and stuff like that. And I think all of us have like a natural kind of protective coating around our ego that keeps us away from magic, whether that's instilled by by a household or by a culture or by nothing at all. I think it's part of the way we might be wired. So excuse me. So, I mean, I definitely had that. I mean, like, for example, I knew how to do chaos magic. I knew how to do sigils. I knew how they worked. And there was, for a long time before I actually did them. And part of me didn't do them because I got started, practicing magic using sigils. And part of me was afraid that, oh, well, this like monkey's paw kind of scenario where if I like, if I wish for something, it's going to come to me from some tragic way, it's like my limbs are going to get amputated or something. And it's like, then it's going to come. I think that's a big part of the way we're wired too, that we're always afraid that there's going to be some terrible, sinister repercussion to practicing magic. And then another part of me is simply, I think anybody that has like, a strong intellect is going to be like, yeah, but this can't work. Like, this can't be real. Like, the logical part of my mind is going to struggle against the efficacy or the belief that magic can actually work. And I think it takes experience, and it takes maybe even training to really get through that, and to really be like, okay, no, like I'm engaging with this, and this is part of it. And I like, you know, I'm like, even now, I mean, even now I have moments of like that, this is rigmarole or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like I have moments of being like, this can't be real. Even astrology. I mean, I called a friend of mine who's very gifted astrologer one day and was like, do you ever have moments that you sit back and you're like, I have to be insane, astrology cannot be real? And this person's like, all the time, because it is these illogical realms and these chaotic, in a sense, even though they are well ordered and elegant, there is the human intellect and the human ego is always going to perceive them as chaotic and mysterious and nonsensical. And so, you know, I think that's kind of I can't speak for everyone, but it definitely is a struggle, or you know, an interior impediment, you might say, to actually engaging with this stuff, or even living a certain way. And I also think, and yeah, I mean, I've seen some scary shit, but I think a vision, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to be pretentious and say it was this like angelic vision or something, but like an entity did come to me when I was younger. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, I'm going to start really getting serious about magic, like at this age, you know, but I'm going to wait till then because I'm having too much fun partying and too much fun, like, you know, living in the world and doing all this stuff. And then I had this, like this being, and it was pretty terrifying. And, you know, it didn't look like a anthropomorphic being or anything, but it was like it looked more like a nebulous space thing. And it's like I just got this like telepathic message, like, no, you're starting now, like it's time to start now. And I've always felt really called, I guess. Even before that, I felt like called, which I guess maybe that's why your prior question of feeling lost, I never really had that. But yeah, and I've seen stuff that has scared me, and I've, you know, and also sometimes I feel like I've been tricked. Like once I was a kid or young, and I was like by a lake in Vermont, this like lovely, you know, lake house, and I'm there by myself, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like summon, you know, an elemental spirit, and then I still don't know what it was, but some fucking, I don't know if it was a bear. I think a bear fell out of a tree limb and splashed into the lake like a couple feet away from me, and it was this massive thing, and I was like, go, like I'm scared to death. I just like bolted back up to the house. And you know, in a way, sometimes I feel like spirits can be playful, and spirits can like play tricks on you, and you know, it's kind of this funny world, you know. But and yeah, when you see something unexplained or uncanny, there are moments of fear for sure. Sometimes just how well astrology works is scary for me, you know, and how being an astrologer and studying astrology is an anxiety inducing thing sometimes, you know, but I think that's part of it. There's like a veil of fear in front of every mystery, and a veil of fear in front of every, you know, maybe even ability that we can kind of obtain.
Yes. I'm so comforted to hear that. Because those thoughts and fears mirror my own so much, that yes, both doubting the legitimacy of what I've done in ritual, or fearing that I haven't done it right, or like my focus wasn't intent enough or something, and also yeah, just feeling like I'm an intelligent modern person, and is this utter bullshit, and am I deceiving myself? And yeah, like the sort of more spooky moments that I've had have always revealed something later, and they don't seem so they don't seem so twinged with like horror movie supernatural elements in it, and it's a lot more understandable after some time has passed, and I was usually taught something. I had an occasion early on in my practice where I used to practice in my garage because that was the only sort of empty space in the house that I could go to privately. And I was doing middle pillar after banishing and a couple other things. And I just heard this like scritching sound in the room and this movement. And I was like, something's in the room. Oh shit, what is that? And it was a little field mouse had like gotten into the hood of my car and was scratching around. But since I was so focused in the ritual, the sound came to me as like something supernatural, and it freaked me out and my heart was pounding, and I was like, oh well, that's kind of adorable actually, and cute that I got so scared. But
Yeah. And that's, you know, I kind of think also that's part of it. Like if you like walk around after you make a talisman, or after you know, obtain some kind of amulet or something, or, you know, because jewelry and other or stones can also be used to augment our astrological chart, or remediate our chart and stuff like that. So, you know, walking around, like noticing what happens. And that's kind of when you're like, oh, okay, wait, this is drawing this kind of thing to me. I mean, you know, the only way you ever really learn is by experiencing things, right? Like it, like people can quote books all the time and say, well, Picatrix book 3 chapter 2 says this, and all this kind of shit. And it's like, well, wait, well, have you done it? Because if you haven't done it, I kind of don't want to hear about it, you know? Yep. And then there's some magicians who are like, okay, well, I did rituals with, you know, Mercury Kazemi, which is conjoined the sun, and this happened, and it was actually pretty sketchy. And then I did other ones with Mercury in Chariot, which means Mercury is invisible because of its proximity to the sun, but still in a sign in which Mercury rules or is exalted. And he's like, and that yielded this, and all these results came. And I'm like, okay, that's valuable information, because, you know, I hear from experience, as opposed to just lore, what a certain magical practice is going to do, and what a certain thing is. And I think we get really caught up in rules. And, you know, there's great teachers and great magicians out there who have the experience, and they're the ones I think that are the most valuable. But you do, if you're a magician, you know, sometimes you do have to burn your fingers. I mean, I've made talismans that, like, my teachers that have been like, I wouldn't do that or something like that, but I'm like, I have to see, you know, like otherwise I have no experience of this. I need to, and so it's kind of worth it, you know. And then you look at, it's kind of worth making mistakes, because then you get knowledge. If it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, this obviously wasn't very good, like when I did this with this configuration, so I'm going to avoid that from now on. Or this ended up working great, even though the books say that it shouldn't. So all kinds of things. And then, I don't know, there's famous astrologers giving elections for people to make Venus talismans, and they look downright dangerous to me. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. And people have different techniques and different stuff, but it gets to the point, I think, when it becomes part of your lifestyle, that inviting scary things, or inviting even potentially, I wouldn't give these elections to, you know, my Patreon or something like that, but I would try them for myself, you know. And that's how you sort of eventually, I think, build up, is going into mysterious. And there's a lot of really brave people out there doing stuff that I was always scared of. And, you know, and then I try the stuff and I'm like, oh, this is actually really, like, not what I thought it was going to be. It's not as dark, or, you know, it might be more cleansing than you thought, or something.
Yes, absolutely. Moving towards those things that are scary. Doing the ritual that freaks you out is sometimes super valuable. And there is like careful nuance about that, because I wouldn't just recommend that to anybody, and there needs to be some discernment and like level of practice and how long they've been doing these things. And there's also adrenaline junkies out there who will just try to do something super wild with Goetia right off the bat, and you know, even that, in a certain sense, I don't think is necessarily dangerous. It might freak them out and they're gonna hopefully learn something, but Yeah, just I would agree. There's great value, and I'm still, there's still shit that I haven't done that I've been kind of holding off on because it's like I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah, and I've done stuff that really fucked me up that I no one would have even thought it would, you know.
hmm,
And so, but it was worth it, you know.
hmm,
And it's like I tend to err on the side of caution more. I think like I
hmm.
tend to be pretty slow about experimenting, and you know,
Yes,
pretty slow because obviously you don't want to invite like negativity into your life and stuff like that. But it's refreshing, you know. People, I took this class, you know, we were doing rituals from the PGM, you know, the Greek magical papyri and stuff like
hmm,
that. And I was like, this sounds scary as shit. And people are just doing it. So I'm like, all right, you know, I guess I'll try it and stuff like that. So it was great because, and I meant to say this earlier too, when I was talking about astrological timing, if you try to time everything that you do, for example, you're never going to get all your PGM rituals done, or you're never going to
yeah,
do all that. So sometimes you're just like, you know what? I feel like doing it right now. I'm just going to do it. If it's not a specifically astrologic, you know, if you're not specifically petitioning astrological, you know, significations or bodies, then there's really no absolute need to use astrology, I guess. But practice is important. I think that not doing stuff is it's better to do it and get no results, or
yeah,
it's better to do it and your results are whatever, than it is to not practice, because practice is how we learn how to be a magician, you know. And being an astrologer and seeing a bunch of people every day is like how I learn about how every single person is like a, I don't want to say a case study that I don't have affection for them, because I do. So,
sure,
you know, it's like there's an emotional component, and I enjoy these people, and I have fun with them for sure. But
yeah,
also they're a case study. You know, it's like, wow, I'm like, this is what it looks like when someone has this kind of chart and they're
mm,
going through this transit and they're going through that. Like now I have like, you know, a kind of a firsthand account from somebody who has a chart totally different from my own, and how they've experienced, and you can log that, right?
yeah,
You become like a database where you're like, oh, sometimes it does this, this is just like somebody else who had that. And you know, the more people that you see as an astrologer is another form of experience, because that's more data, you know, that filters into your understanding of stuff, and
mm,
filters into your, I guess, proficiency in a way as an astrologer, you know. Because Austin Osman Spare, you know, the chaos magician,
hmm, hmm,
the original chaos magician,
right,
Edwardian artist, he had a saying, knowledge is the excrement of experience,
mm,
which I think is really important for all of us, like astrologers and magicians, especially in this Twitter zone or whatever, where like how much I can present, that how much knowledge I could present is in a way the only demarcation of my worth as a magician or something, or an astrologer. Whereas like, no, like, what kind of life have you lived? You know, how much experience have you uh, garnered, you know, and what does that do? I mean, look, I've never written a book on astrology or magic, and there's a
hmm,
lot of people my age and younger who have. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm such a dumbass. Like, I spent all these years being like an international playboy, and I should have just been doing that. And it's like, well, wait, at the end of the day, I mean, who's the more successful magician? Somebody who lived a life that was very rich and, you know, crazy and luxurious and wild, or someone who's written more books? I mean, they both have value, you know. It's like, and we all have different roles to play and different paths to take. But it's just interesting how you know, how we value uh or how we stratify astrological or magical competence and things like that. And at the end of the day, it's how you live the stuff, you know,
yes,
and how you make use of it and how you share it, and how, I know embody is like a like trite word now, but it's kind of true. You know what I mean? How you live this, and how you experience it, and how aware you are of it all the time, and how you exist within it. You know, that's powerful. That's more powerful than how many books you read. I remember I was young. I used to work at a vintage store here in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and many years, a great place to learn and grow, actually. And I would go out every day when the sun was at certain points in the sky to do Liber Resh Vel Helios, which you might know. You know, it's an Aleister Crowley thing. You go at 4 times a day, you worship the sun in different as a different Egyptian deity, right? In the morning, hail unto thee who art Ra and thy rising, hail unto thee who art Hathor and thy beauty, and when it's in the mid course, and Tum and thy. So you worship the sun at the rising, the mid heaven, and the descendant, but basically, and also the Kefra, the beetle god, at the midnight of the sun. So I'd go out to do this, and I actually did it this morning, and I was like, God, it's such a powerful practice. I recommend it to everyone. But this was many years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And this girl is like, young lady is like, wow, you must look at all of us as like such, you know, mortals or dumbasses, because you're like doing all this stuff. And especially this person who asked me, because she's a remarkable young lady. I mean, she's awesome. And I was like, no, if anything, I could be like deficient, because I need this stuff to live as like centered or as enlightened or as embodied as other people might do just naturally. You know, it's not that I'm more advanced. It's that I want to be more advanced, you know, and you are no less advanced than I am at all as a person. You know, it's kind of not, it's a weird paradox. It's not really about being a better magician. It's about being a better person or something, in a way. You know, you just want to be more developed, and you want to be more evolved, I think. And whatever method you use to get you there is valid, you know, and magical in its own way, or enlightened in its own way. You know, it's not, there's not one path.
Yes, absolutely. These symbols and archetypes and deities and spirits can bolster up a personality that is perhaps deficient, like you said. And I mean, I would absolutely resonate with that these things have given me a sense of power, not so that I can lord it over others, and not so that I can move around as this arrogant guy who thinks he's some powerful high magus, but it's just like, no, these things give me a sense of confidence and trust that I never had for a lot of years. So yeah, I love that. And it's anyone within, I mean, there's a lot of arrogant pricks within the magical world. And there's also a lot of people who get fixated on just the heady knowledge and all the Aleister Crowley quotes, and they have everything memorized about Kabbalah and astrology. And it's just like, my sweet friend, please move away from the head knowledge. Your mind is a delusion anyway. Like, practice, like we're saying. Anyhow.
Yeah, well, I mean, that happened to me during lockdown. I basically became like a brain in a jar. You know, all I did was like make drawings and study astrology, like all in depth with like and magic, with, you know, making lunar mansion talismans and, you know, all that stuff. And the whole time, because I was like, wow, there's no society in which to conform, and I suffered for it. I ended up like with a bunch of chronic pain, because I was so outside of my physical nature, and so like buzzing in my brain, that I ended up with like chronic pain and like muscle tightness, and, you know, like losing strength and all this stuff. I wasn't working out and things like that. So it's important to be you know, in the world, and it's also important to look at who's giving you advice and be like, oh, okay, is this somebody who I would want to emulate, right? Is this somebody whose life I feel like is a testament to their success as a magician. I mean, I have teachers like that. I have co-occultists like that. I have chiefs in my magical order who I'm like, I respect this person. If like this person seems to me that they are on a path that is wise and that is powerful, and then therefore I'm going to listen to them, you know? So as long as somebody earns your trust and your respect, I definitely think it's, you know, there's a lot to learn, you know? But social media rewards people, I think, for just acting like an elder or acting like an authority right away. And who knows who they like heard that from the night before in a lecture, and the next day put it out like they were just thinking about it while they were having their coffee. You know, it's like people steal stuff and things like that. And it's more about, looking deep into the person, I think, and being like, no, this is someone who I feel like I want to learn from. My teacher Austin, my teacher Bernadette Brady, Ryan Butler, Christopher Warnock. There's so many people out there who I'm like, all right, these people are, I can tell that they have the experience and the enlightenment and the intellect and the high level of functioning to they're worthy of being teachers, I think,
Yes.
and not everybody is,
Certainly.
like I mean, people ask me all the time that they want me to be their teacher. Like I don't mean to flatter myself or anything,
No.
but it is just true that people say it to me very regularly. And I'm like, honestly, I do give lectures and I will give workshops, but to take someone on as a student is something that I honestly, I have too much humility in the face of like magic and astrology and its immensity right now to claim that level of authority that I could really feel comfortable doing that, and not to say that I wouldn't make a good teacher, but at this stage in my life, I just have too much humility in the face of something that is immense and like mysterious and vast. So but eventually, hopefully I'll get there, because I would like to teach someday, I think.
Sure.
So
I think that's a super healthy perspective and awareness and humility. And in many ways, I mean, you are already teaching people through your astrology readings and through conversations like this. Like the knowledge that you do have is still reaching the right people at the right time.
Yeah, and it's really cool too. I mean, I do love like the lectures that I give. It's amazing. Like I really do feel like everybody walks out like with the knowledge that they need to, like, for example, make a particular talisman or find something in their chart or understand a certain resonance. And it's a great feeling when people get excited about this kind of stuff, because it's what I find the most exciting. It's what turns me on the most and inspires me the most. So I like to inspire other people, and I like to be on the same level as people. Like, when you come to me as an astrological client, I don't want to be some guru who's gonna like impart some earth-shattering stuff to you. It's like, no, we're in this together. Like, I have struggles as well. Like, I'm human too. I mean, I have a familiarity with certain things and maybe certain studies and stuff like that, but I'm not some, like, I'm your servant, if anything. What I mean? Like, I'm working for you, so I like to educate people when they see me at least a little bit about astrology, so that I'm not throwing jargon at them. We're on the same page when I explain why a certain time is going to have a certain significance. And it's of course a discourse too. The information that they put forth is very useful in determining how certain astrological themes are present, say, in their life, and how they tend to come forth. So it's very much a discourse, and it's very much you know, it's not a master and servant dynamic at all.
Yeah.
It's a common thing. It's a, I don't know, we'd call it like a camaraderie maybe.
Yes. Yes. And thank goodness, because we need people like that.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking for a while, so let's wrap this up. But I
Okay.
love talking with you, Micki. I think you're fucking rad. You're solid gold, man. And
Thank you.
if you, is there anywhere that you want to send people to find your work? I would encourage people to watch your show, Time Lord TV, because it's badass.
Oh
But,
yeah, I've got a show, Time Lord TV. We're on YouTube, so you know, the occult tropes that are there. And I'm also just Micki Pellerano on Instagram. I've got a website, mickipellerano.com. That's how people reach me. They find my email there. They DM me if they want to have a session and stuff like that quite often. So it works great. So
excellent.
yeah.
Well, thank you for being willing to talk with me. I had a blast with this.
Yeah, it was my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
You got it.